Hollywood spent probably the last 15 or 20 years basically telling half of its audience that they don't want them to watch, that they hate them, that they're deplorables. People just go to the movies to be entertained. They don't go to be lectured about how terrible they are because of who they support politically.
In this episode, I'm sitting down with actor and director Nick Searcy. Best known for his role as Art Mullen in the TV series Justified, he played Ronald Reagan's Chief of Staff James Baker in the Reagan biopic released last year.
They have quotas in terms of the racial makeup of a movie.
He's also the director of Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer.
Everybody was afraid to distribute the film. They had one distributor say, I really like the film, I think it's very good, but I can't be the one to release this because it would ruin me.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Nick Searcy, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
No, thank you. Thanks. Nice to be here.
Recently, President Trump announced a 100% tariff on films made outside of the United States. What do you make of this?
I think it's kind of about time. I mean, it's funny. I've been trying to get this movie made that I wrote with a friend of mine about the Texas border that we've been trying to get done for probably 6 years now. Finally found a company that wanted to make it. And they said, yeah, we'd like to make it, but we want to shoot it in Thailand. I'm like, you want to shoot Thailand for Texas? And they go, look, 50% cheaper there. You can make the movie for literally half the budget. So every job I've done in the last few years has been Canada, it's been Dominican Republic, it's been overseas, England. So it's something's got to be done. We got to get American productions shooting back in America.
Is it just that it's so inflated here, or that they make it so unreasonably cheap over there? Mm-hmm. I mean, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that, you know, transportation costs, gas, fuel costs, and union labor costs is probably the main driver of it. It's just cheaper to pay a crew there. It's cheaper to travel all the actors to a foreign country and pay the crew what the crew gets there than it is to shoot in America and pay the American wages, you know. I think that's most of it. And then also there are tax incentives, you know, they're definitely in Canada, the tax incentives are probably a bigger part of why you shoot in Canada than the labor costs. Mm-hmm. Because labor is probably not that much different in Canada, but the taxes are.
So, yeah, I was looking at a talk you gave about 5 years ago, and you basically said that we, meaning let's say more conservative-leaning actors, entertainment industry people, you know, need to really get into the game of entertainment. We got to build a new Hollywood. You were saying that we have an opening right now to do so. Mm-hmm. What is it about Hollywood that makes that need something that's essential in your mind?
Well, Hollywood spent probably the last 15 or 20 years basically telling half of its audience that they don't want them to watch, that they hate them, that they're deplorables. You know, if you don't support Obama, if you're not for these rights, transgender rights, these different rights groups, if you're not part of that, then we're going to demonize you, and we're going to make programming that makes fun of you, that ridicules you. And so that's what's been happening. They've driven half the audience away. People just go to the movies to be entertained. They don't go to be lectured about how terrible they are because of who they support politically. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Hollywood's been doing for 25, 30 years, and people are sick of it, and half the country's just turned them off. And so that's what I mean by there's an opportunity there. People to make movies that are not necessarily conservative movies, but movies that just aren't ramming a woke philosophy down your throat.
Mm. How is it that you kind of survived Hollywood? I mean, you've played all sorts of different roles. You've been a director, you've been a producer, actor, sitcoms, movies. What was your evolution in thinking?
I don't know that I did evolve that much. You know, I was in New York for 7 years in my 20s, sort of doing stage and not really getting anywhere in the film business. I didn't really get started until I was in my 30s, we had moved back to North Carolina, my wife and I, to have our baby. We didn't want to have the baby in New York City. And the movie business was down in North Carolina, and I started doing smaller parts, and I sort of built my career up in North Carolina, acting in Georgia and things. And Fried Green Tomatoes was the movie that kind of put me on the map enough that I could move to LA. So by the time I moved to Los Angeles, I was already in my 30s. I had a child. I was kind of a grown-up, and my belief system was already pretty set. It didn't change me much. When I first went to Hollywood, I didn't know I was supposed to keep my mouth shut about what I thought. So by the time I realized that, it was too late, and I figured, well, everybody knows by now. I'm just going to have to go with it.
But you were, successful, I think, by any standard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Everything I got, I kind of scratched and clawed and auditioned for and won, because I didn't know anybody. I was just a kid from North Carolina. I didn't even know any professional actors. I've been fortunate to be part of some really great movies. And the joke I tell is that, people with good taste obviously think I'm good. That's why I don't do very many bad movies.
What you said about, clawing your way, I think, most actors or actresses would say that's just the business. What's your likelihood of being successful in Hollywood compared to how many people show up? It's very low.
Very
right?
low, yeah.
And so, but somehow, and you said your belief system was set, but what I'm saying is this feels to me like it goes against, kind of your thesis here, right? That you can't make it as someone who has a more conservative viewpoint.
Well, I do think Hollywood's changed, though. I mean, I was there for 30 years. So when I went there, it was, Clinton was president, it wasn't so divided. It wasn't so galvanized, And so you could have discussions with people back then. I remember having a discussion fairly civil discussions with Democrats on set, making some jokes about Clinton or whatever, and it was fairly good-natured. But after Bush, when Bush got in and the Iraq War and then Obama right after, that's when it really got to be like, okay, if you're not one of us, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a terrible human being, and that sort of thing. So it kind of evolved to the point where, I think it was more dangerous to come out as a conservative. If I'd come out as a conservative while Bush was president, then it probably would have been more difficult. But my trajectory was already set in terms of my acting career, before it really got so polarized.
I see. This is something that's very, very interesting. There is these, huge awards ceremonies, a variety of the Oscars being kind of, I suppose, supposed to be the pinnacle. But when you see the Oscars, you don't necessarily know a lot of the films. I mean, I definitely wasn't like that when I was younger. These were, blockbusters, and there's something that's shifted, like you're saying, that's for sure.
Yeah, when we were growing up, in the 70s, everybody knew every movie. Everybody watched the Oscars like it was the Super Bowl. And you're going, oh, wow, is Five Easy Pieces going to win? Is The Godfather, The Apartment, all these movies that everybody knew, French Connection. And now they nominate 10 films. They're barely in theaters. They're in theaters for a week to qualify, and then they're on Netflix or something. So it's just a totally different way of doing the award ceremonies that has nothing to do with quality or the popularity of the film or how well the film is received. It has more to do with, does the content fit our political ideology? And do we want to reward a film that doesn't fit our political ideology?
How is it possible to make films that aren't popular? Isn't that how it works? I mean, isn't that where the money comes from?
Well, yes, you would think, but I think Hollywood has some deep pockets, and the way films get made now, it's not so much dependent on the box office now as it used to be, because now they're made by streaming services, so everything's kind of spread out. You're paying your $15 a month to a streaming service so they can make a bunch of things that you don't want to see, but they'll make that one thing that you do. That's what I think has happened, is that, films are just not so dependent on straight people buying tickets.
I remember like it was Netflix or HBO would go out and just buy and produce a massive mini series or series or movie and they pick the actors presumably from their data. These are the actors that people like. These are the themes that people like, and they would construct film around that. But I suppose that could be leveraged in a different way. That same approach, right? Instead of going for the gold, you could be going for some sort of ideological.
And now they literally, they have quotas in terms of, the racial makeup of a movie. I think I heard that Reagan was not eligible to be considered for the Oscars because the cast was too white. Well, it's a historical piece. I mean, what are you going to do? Non-traditional casting about a slice of history? It doesn't make any sense, and so that's why Hollywood is falling apart. And I mean, I just left Hollywood 4 years ago. I left Burbank, and I just know so many people there that are just like, there's no work. Editors, camera people, they're all moving away because there's nothing for them to do.
Tell me about making Reagan.
Well, that was, I knew the producers, and they'd asked me to be part of it, and it took a long time because we shot it in the middle of COVID. And so there were all these crazy restrictions that they had to go by. SAG had imposed all this stuff, and it was such a huge cast that it became almost comical. I mean, we weren't allowed to ride in the van together to the set because we might kill each other with COVID or something. So we all had to have our own rental cars. We all had to drive ourselves. Each actor had his own golf cart. So when there's 10 of us in a scene in a boardroom, sitting around the table, well, there's 10 golf carts bringing us all. I mean, it was kind of silly. I guess the producers couldn't help it. They had to do it to get the movie made. But there was, for example, there was one scene where we were supposed to be the 1976 Republican National Convention. We're all crammed into this little room. They're shooting it tight. They want to make it look like we're on the floor of the convention. And so they bring the actors that have lines. They bring us all to this set, and all the background actors have masks on. They're in costume, but they have their masks on. And we're principal actors don't have their masks on because I guess we're superhuman beings and we, impervious to the disease or something. So we get there and the first AD says, okay, everybody, when you hear rolling, everybody take your mask off and put it in your pocket. And make sure you tuck it in so that those little strings don't hang out. And then we'll play the scene. And then as soon as it's over, just put your mask on back as quickly as you can. And I said, yeah, everybody, because when cameras are rolling, it's 1976 and the virus didn't exist back then. So if you act really well, you'll survive. But if you suck, you might get COVID. So everybody be on your best behavior. So it was a little silly, but it's a great movie, I think. It's a great thing to be a part of. Got to play James Baker, which was fun. I had a nice wig. The joke was it was an honor to play James Baker. It's the first time I've ever played a swamp creature.
Thank you for tuning in to American Thought Leaders. In a world where spin and agendas dominate the headlines, I'm proud to bring you unfiltered insights from the brightest minds in America, from a relative outsider Canadian perspective. To keep this possible and to access even more exclusive content, in-depth documentaries, in our daily digital newspaper, consider subscribing to the Epoch Times today. It's your way to support independent journalism. Just hit the link in the description below to subscribe and unlock the full American Thought Leaders experience and so much more. You can try it today for just $1 a week. So just hit the link in the description below. And now back to the interview. And we're back with actor, producer, director, and author Nick Searcy. Tell me about, of course, Jon Voight is in the film. I've been thinking about the special ambassadors that President Trump has assigned to Hollywood. We haven't heard much about them since they were assigned. Do you know if they're? It's Jon Voight, Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, of course. Do you know if they're doing anything?
Well, I think Jon Voight is the one who I heard this, that he was came up with the tariff on foreign films, tariff on films shot overseas. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not. It's a funny thing about the conservative side of filmmaking, conservative side of Hollywood. what happens is you get people like John Voight, Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, who have such big stars that doesn't matter, right? Their conservatism is not going to affect them. Maybe it'll affect them with certain people, but they're never going to be hurting for work. There's always going to be people that want to have them in their movie just because they're great actors and they bring a huge body of work to the table. But they've kind of made it. There's not a big movement on the conservative side to help out conservatives that are lower down on the ladder.
What could they do?
Well, people with that kind of power, I mean, with that kind of star power, they could form a studio. It's been done in the past, United Artists, that kind of thing. They could have enough money and power that they could pull together a studio, because that's what's needed. That's why Netflix and Amazon is able to churn out so many films. They have pooled their resources so that they're making the kinds of films that support what they believe in. We don't do that. Conservatives are afraid of investing in films because basically it's a bad investment. Chances are you're going to lose your money. So what we have to do if we really want to compete is create a system where we're able to make 10 films and maybe one of them makes enough money to float the other 9. That's what they do. So I wish that they would use their star power and their influence to build something like that, but I don't think they will. It's not how the conservative mind works. We're all individuals. We all want to do what's best for us, and we don't necessarily think collectively like the left does.
So you have been advocating for the building of this, more conservative or right-leaning Hollywood for a while. I mean, I watched that talk you gave about five years ago at Hillsdale College, and so I guess it's not going well, right? Is that the?
Well, I think it's going well on an individual basis. You have some films that are breaking through here and there. You have Sound of Freedom, which made a fortune, and you have studios that are coming up. You have, the Daily Wire said they were going to get into entertainment, although I think that's kind of been a failed experiment up to this point. Have Angel Studios.
And they have a very interesting, different business model, right? That they came up with The Chosen.
Right, and Angel Studios, it's kind of a misnomer. They're not really a studio. They're more of a business. They're more of a distribution company. But you can go to Angel Studios with an idea, and they will pass that idea along to their investors. And if their investors vote that that's something that they should throw money at, they do. So that's a good start. I mean, it's definitely heading in the right direction. I just don't think that we're there yet. It's still too hard. Every conservative filmmaker that I know is in the same boat that I am. We're out there trying to get somebody to invest in our one project, our single project. I have a project called Where I'm Bound, Labor of Love for Me. It's a movie about gospel quartet music in the 1960s. Really great story, great script. We've had a great response to it, but it's hard to get conservatives to invest in a movie because they've been burned before. A lot of conservative investors have lost their money. And that's because it's not a situation where you're investing in a spate of films, so that it can be spread out over, if this one doesn't do that well, maybe this one does. If you're investing in one movie at a time, it's riskier. And so I think that's what we're up against. We need something like a Sony or a Warner Brothers on the conservative side.
Something just occurred to me. You made the film Gosnell, of course. You directed it. Incredible film. Heart-wrenching, difficult film, very difficult film. When we were talking earlier, you were mentioning it. There's some reason why the distribution of this film isn't very good. Maybe it's because it's so difficult. But I wonder if this, angel model of pay it forward might actually work for this film, right? It started with The Chosen. It was a brilliant idea, right?
Right.
If people who are, presumably Christian want to share the story of Jesus, which probably a lot of them do,
Right.
they can pay for others to see it, and it seemed to
Right.
work really well for them, right?
Yeah.
And they tried it with other films. It worked for some other productions as well. Maybe it would work for this production. Maybe actually tell me a little bit about this film for the benefit of those who haven't heard it, about Gosnell and where it's at right now.
Well, Gosnell was crowdfunded. You know, that's the thing about Gosnell. It wasn't investors. They just gave the money to Ann and Phelim to make the movie. And so we made it for that amount. I had sort of lobbied, why don't we just like get some investors too, and then we'll have a little bigger budget and we can make a better movie. But they didn't like that idea. I think they raised $2.3 million. And then they spent whatever they spent on the script and whatever. So we made the movie for less than $2 million. And finally got distribution. It took us 2 years to get distribution. Everybody was afraid to distribute the film. They had one distributor, kind of a big Hollywood distributor, say, I really like the film, I think it's very good, but I can't be the one to release this because it would ruin me.
Tell it for those that aren't familiar with the story. Maybe just give us a quick synopsis.
Gosnell was a true story about Kermit Gosnell, a doctor in Philadelphia who ran a woman's clinic that was really an abortion mill, and where he did a lot of illegal abortions, not only after the approved limits, but literally killing babies after they were born. And this was discovered by a detective who was investigating the clinic for like narcotics fraud. It became a big national story that, you know, the national media ignored. And that's why Ann and Phelim wanted to make the movie. The movie was as much about what Kermit Gosnell did as it was about how the media tried to suppress it because it didn't support their abortion agenda. So that's what the movie was about, and we tried to make a really strict kind of just the facts, ma'am, kind of courtroom drama.
Right.
I didn't want it to be preachy. I didn't want, you know, I remember when I first read the script, the thing that attracted me to it was this one scene where Gosnell's attorney, who I wound up playing, is cross-examining a legitimate abortion doctor. And he makes her tell us all the steps that happen in an abortion. And I remember reading that and going, I did not know that's what it was. You know, you hear about abortion and you have some sort of idea about it, but you don't know exactly what they do. And that's why I wanted to make the movie. It was really that scene. I just said, okay, if we're going to talk about abortion, you can have whatever opinion you want to about it, but let's focus on what it really is. This is what it is. Support it or don't support it is up to you.
All right. Final thought as we finish?
Hollywood has given up its place as the gatekeeper for entertainment, and that there's a wide open, big wide avenue for us to drive down. And we've got to figure out a way, hopefully with the ambassadors that Trump has appointed, we've got to figure out a way to drive down that highway and start making content that people really like, because there's not enough of that right now.
Well, Nick Searcy, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Thank you all for joining Nick Searcy and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.